What if I told you that the greatest masterpieces of the ancient world were far more than just beautiful objects? These creations hold layers of meaning so profound, they blur the lines between art, science, and the sacred. Picture the weight of a chisel in your hand, the dust of stone in the air, as artisans thousands of years ago shaped not just physical forms, but entire philosophies into being. Every curve, every symbol, every precise alignment was a conversation with the universe itself. From the towering pyramids of Egypt to the serene Buddha statues of the East, these works were never meant to be merely seen. They were designed to awaken something deeper within us. Think about the last time you stood before an ancient artifact in a museum. That quiet pull you felt wasn't just curiosity, it was recognition. These pieces carry a kind of magic, a silent language that speaks across centuries. The golden ratio in Greek sculptures wasn't just about aesthetics. It mirrored the mathematical patterns found in galaxies and seashells. The mandalas of Hindu and Buddhist traditions weren't mere decorations. They were maps of cosmic order, meant to guide the viewer toward enlightenment. Even the placement of Stonehenge's massive stones tracked the movements of celestial bodies with staggering accuracy. What we call art was, for these civilizations, a fusion of earthly skill and celestial wisdom. This is the hidden thread connecting ancient masterpieces. They were never just about the physical world. They were bridges between the seen and the unseen, the mortal and the divine. The artists and builders who created them understood something we've often forgotten, that true mastery lies where disciplines meet. A sculptor had to be an astronomer. An architect had to be a priest, and the results timeless, because when art carries the weight of universal truths, it doesn't fade with the ages. It waits for us to rediscover its lessons. So today, we're stepping into that role not as passive observers, but as explorers. Together, we'll trace the fingerprints of genius left behind in stone, metal, and pigment, uncovering how these works still hold up mirrors to our own search for meaning. The journey starts now. Long before the pyramids pierced the sky or temples rose from the earth, humanity's first artists were leaving whispers of their world on cave walls. These early creators didn't just paint animals, they captured the pulse of life itself. In the flickering torchlight of Lascaux or Altamira, bison and horses seemed to breathe across the stone, their forms alive with movement and mystery. But why these weren't mere decorations? Hidden in the curves of ochre and charcoal lies a startling truth. Art began as a sacred dialogue. Every stroke was a prayer, a plea, or perhaps a portal. Take the Venus figurines, those small carvings of voluptuous women found across Europe. For decades, scholars debated their purpose, but look closer. Their exaggerated curves weren't just about fertility. They were talismans, physical manifestations of survival and abundance in an unforgiving world. Imagine holding one 25,000 years ago. This wasn't a statue, it was hope carved in ivory or stone. The same goes for cave paintings layered with handprints. These weren't signatures, they were connections. Pressing a palm against the wall, then blowing pigment around it, was like reaching through the veil between worlds. Symbols wrapped these early works like invisible threads. Zigzags might represent water or lightning. Spirals could echo the cycles of life and seasons. Even the act of painting deep inside caves, far from sunlight, suggests these spaces were more than galleries, they were sanctuaries. Modern eyes see art. Ancient eyes saw magic, and here's the revelation. This primal fusion of skill and spirituality never faded. It evolved. The same reverence that shaped a Paleolithic bison later guided the hands carving Egyptian gods or casting Chinese bronze vessels. What's extraordinary is how these ancient artists cracked a code we still chase today. They understood that true artistry isn't just about making things, it's about encoding meaning. A Mesopotamian cylinder seal rolling out its intricate pattern wasn't just marking clay tablets, it was embedding stories into bureaucracy. The petroglyphs of the American Southwest didn't just record events, they anchored memories to the land itself. This was the birth of visual language where every dot, line, and figure held layers of understanding. So when we admire these earliest works, we're not just looking at humanity's first attempts at art. We're witnessing the moment creativity and cosmology clasped hands. That urge to transcend, to carve order from chaos, to touch the divine through form, never left us. It's why a child today still traces their fingers over cave paintings, feeling the echo of that ancient spark. And it's why, thousands of years later, the greatest masterpieces still stir something wordless inside us. They're speaking in a language older than writing, one we instinctively understand. The Pyramids of Giza don't just dominate the horizon, they defy time itself. Built over 4,500 years ago with blocks weighing more than elephants, these structures weren't just tombs, they were cosmic calculators in stone. Every angle, every corridor, every inch of their design whispers secrets about a civilization that saw no divide between the earthly and the celestial. Take the Great Pyramid's base. Its sides align almost perfectly with the four cardinal directions, deviating by less than a fraction of a degree. How? Ancient builders likely used the stars, tracking the movements of constellations like Orion's belt, which some believe the pyramid's layout mirrors. But precision wasn't just about astronomy, it was sacred geometry in action. The pyramid's height relates to its perimeter in the same ratio as a circle's radius to its circumference, echoing the mathematical constant pi. This wasn't coincidence, it was intentional, a way to encode universal truths into architecture. Even the materials held meaning. The polished limestone casing stones, now mostly gone, once reflected sunlight so brightly the pyramids were said to glow like light on the horizon, a bridge between the pharaoh's soul and the sun god Ra. Construction techniques remain one of history's greatest puzzles. Without modern tools, how did workers quarry and transport 2 million stones, some from over 500 miles away? Theories range from ingenious ramp systems to wet sand reducing friction, but what's undeniable is the human ingenuity behind it. This wasn't slave labor. Evidence suggests skilled artisans worked in rotating crews, fed by bread and beer from nearby bakeries. The pyramids, then, were a national project uniting science, labor, and faith. Spiritually, the pyramid's shape was no accident. Its sloping sides symbolized rays of sunlight, a ladder for the pharaoh's ascent to the gods. Hidden chambers like the King's Gallery, with its towering corbelled ceiling, weren't just structural feats, they were sacred pathways. Even the air shafts pointed to stars like Sirius, believed to guide souls to the afterlife. The pyramids weren't just buildings, they were resurrection machines blending engineering with esoteric belief, and perhaps that's their lasting power. They remind us that the ancients didn't separate disciplines. A priest was an architect, a mathematician was a poet. To stand before the pyramids today is to witness a mindset where every stone held multitudes, a perfect marriage of cosmos and craft. Their builders left us more than monuments, they left a challenge. Can we, in our age of specialization, rediscover that unity of vision? The pyramids whisper, look up, measure well, and build with the universe in mind. Stonehenge rises from the English countryside like a riddle written in stone. Those massive slabs, some weighing over 25 tons, weren't dragged nearly 200 miles from Wales just to stand in a circle. Every placement, every angle whispers of a deeper purpose, one that tied the rhythms of human life to the grand dance of the cosmos. At dawn on the summer solstice, sunlight pierces precisely between the heel stone and the altar, flooding the center with golden light. But this wasn't just a celestial spectacle, it was a sacred moment frozen in architecture. The builders of Stonehenge, working over 1,500 years before the Common Era, understood something profound. The sky wasn't just above them, it was part of them. The monument's alignments don't just mark solstices, they track lunar cycles, eclipses, and even the subtle wobble of Earth's axis over centuries. Some stones mirror constellations, while the Aubrey holes, those mysterious pits circling the site, may have been used to predict lunar eclipses. Imagine standing there 3,500 years ago, watching priests or astronomers use these stones like a giant calendar, predicting seasons for planting or festivals with uncanny accuracy. Yet Stonehenge wasn't merely a scientific tool. The bones found buried there tell another story. Many show signs of illness or injury, suggesting pilgrims traveled here seeking healing. The blue stones hauled from distant quarries were believed to hold curative powers. This was a place where science and spirit intertwined, where measuring the stars went hand in hand with honoring ancestors or conducting rituals. The same hands that calculated alignments likely poured offerings to the gods, blurring the line between astronomer and priest. What's astonishing is the scale of cooperation this required. Transporting those stones without wheels or draft animals would have taken generations of shared effort. This wasn't one tribe's project. It was a cross-cultural gathering place, as evidenced by artifacts from as far away as the Mediterranean. Stonehenge became a living symbol of unity, where diverse communities converged to celebrate, mourn, and marvel at the heavens. Today, when we see visitors wrapped in blankets waiting for the solstice sunrise, they're partaking in something ancient. That collective gasp as light spills through the stones, it's the same awe their ancestors felt, a reminder that we still crave connection to cycles larger than ourselves. Stonehenge endures not just as a feat of engineering, but as a testament to humanity's eternal quest to find meaning in the stars and to ground that wonder in stone. 4 years of aching backs and strained necks, that's what it took for Michelangelo to transform the Sistine Chapel's ceiling into a soaring testament to human potential. Perched on scaffolding 60 feet above the floor, his brushes danced across wet plaster, blending the precision of an anatomist with the vision of a mystic. This wasn't just painting, it was a theological revolution in pigment. Every inch of the ceiling pulses with intention. Take the creation of Adam, where God's outstretched finger nearly touches man's, a gap so charged with meaning, it's echoed in medical textbooks today. Scholars note the red cloak behind God mirrors the shape of a human brain, suggesting divinity isn't just above us, it's within our very capacity to think. Geometry hid in plain sight throughout the frescoes. The ceiling's layout divides into 9 panels, echoing the Trinity multiplied 3 times 3, a sacred number layered with significance. Michelangelo plotted sightlines so viewers below would experience optical illusions. Prophets and Sibyls appear to lean forward, their proportions distorted to look natural from the chapel floor. Even the colors whispered secrets. Lapis lazuli blue, ground from precious Afghan stone, wasn't just lavish. It symbolized heaven's vault, while the green earth tones anchoring scenes like the drunkenness of Noah grounded biblical stories in human frailty. Yet the true genius lies in how Michelangelo wrestled with contradictions. His muscular, twisting figures like the defiant Jonah plunging toward the altar marry classical Greek ideals with Christian fervor. The ceiling's central panels trace Genesis, but flanking them are pagan Sibyls, their presence declaring that truth could be found beyond scripture. This was the Renaissance in full flower, a world where dissecting cadavers to study muscles didn't negate faith but deepened reverence for the Creator's design. The chapel itself became a living metaphor. As worshippers gazed upward, they enacted the soul's ascent from the chaos of the flood near the entrance to the luminous creation above the altar. Michelangelo's brushstrokes whispered a radical idea, that art could be a ladder between earth and heaven, and that human hands, guided by both compass and conviction, might trace the divine. Today, when 5 million visitors annually crane their necks in wonder, they're not just seeing a masterpiece, they're standing inside a manifesto, one that dares us to believe that beauty, science, and the sacred were never meant to be parted. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man isn't just a sketch, it's a manifesto in ink. At first glance, it appears simple, a nude man with outstretched limbs framed by a circle and square. But look closer, every line pulses with intention, a fusion of art and science so precise, it still takes our breath away. Drawn around 1490, this wasn't mere illustration. It was Leonardo's answer to an ancient question: what does it mean to be perfectly human? The secret lies in its name. Leonardo was riffing on Vitruvius, a Roman architect who claimed ideal buildings should mirror human proportions. But Leonardo didn't just copy those ideas, he proved them. His meticulous measurements revealed that a well-built body follows mathematical harmonies. The span of outstretched arms equals height. The distance from hairline to chin fits 8 times into total height. These weren't arbitrary numbers, they echoed the ratios found in nature, from branching rivers to spiral galaxies, the circle and square framing the figure. They symbolized cosmic unity, the circle as heaven's perfection, the square as Earth's stability. Humanity, Leonardo argued, bridges both realms. What's astonishing is how he made the invisible visible. Dissecting corpses by candlelight, Leonardo mapped muscles and bones with surgeon-like precision. Yet he also saw beyond flesh, the Vitruvian man's dual poses. One static, one dynamic capture the paradox of human existence. We're anchored in physical form, yet capable of boundless transformation. His outstretched limbs touch both circle and square, suggesting we're not just part of the universe, we're its microcosm. This was the Renaissance mind at its peak. Artists weren't just decorators, they were investigators uncovering nature's blueprints. Leonardo's sketch distilled a radical idea, that beauty and truth could be measured, that the divine wasn't just felt but calculated. Centuries before fractals or quantum physics, he intuited that the same patterns govern stars and cells alike. And here's the magic: the Vitruvian man still speaks. Modern scans confirm his proportions align with average human measurements, validating his blend of observation and intuition. But more than that, it's become a symbol of aspiration. That figure, balanced between shapes, reminds us we're not just observers of cosmic order, we're living expressions of it. Every time we see that iconic image on textbooks, coffee mugs, or space agency logos, we're nodding to an idea as timeless as it is urgent, that humanity's potential lies exactly where art, science, and wonder collide. The Parthenon stands on the Acropolis like a hymn carved in marble, its columns stretching toward the Athenian sky with a precision that still baffles modern architects. But this wasn't just a temple to Athena, it was a mathematical prayer, a physical embodiment of the Greek belief that beauty and divinity could be measured. Every line, every curve whispers of a civilization obsessed with harmony. Take the columns, they bulge slightly in the middle, an optical trick called intosses that makes them appear perfectly straight from a distance. And those famous steps, they curve upward at the edges, counteracting the illusion of sagging created by the human eye. These weren't accidents, they were calculated corrections, proof that the Greeks understood perception itself could be engineered. At the heart of its design lies the golden ratio, that mystical proportion found in seashells and galaxies. The Parthenon's facade fits almost exactly into a golden rectangle, its height to width mirroring the same 1:1.618 ratio that governs so much of nature. Even the spacing of the columns follows this divine mathematics, creating a rhythm that feels instinctively pleasing. But here's the revelation: this wasn't just about aesthetics. To the Greeks, the golden ratio was a glimpse into the mind of the cosmos, a tangible link between human creativity and universal order. When worshippers approached the Parthenon, they weren't just seeing a building, they were witnessing geometry made sacred. Yet the temple's genius goes deeper than ratios. Its sculptures, now mostly housed in museums, were originally painted in vivid blues and reds, their dynamic poses capturing Athena's wisdom and power. The east pediment showed her birth, springing fully armed from Zeus's head, while the frieze depicted the Panathenaic procession, where citizens carried a woven peplos to clothe her statue. This wasn't mere decoration. It was storytelling in 3 dimensions, a way to weave myth into daily life. And let's not forget the colossal Chryselephantine statue of Athena inside, her skin of ivory and robes of gold leaf shimmering in the dim light. A single beam of sunlight through the door would have set her ablaze, a literal manifestation of divine presence. The Parthenon's influence ripples through centuries. Roman architects copied its proportions, Renaissance artists studied its harmonies. Even today, courthouses and capitals around the world echo its columns, borrowing its aura of authority and balance. But perhaps its greatest lesson is this: the Greeks didn't separate art from science or worship from wonder. To them, a temple wasn't just a place to pray, it was a mirror held up to the universe, reflecting back the perfect order they believed governed all things. When we walk through its shadow now, we're not just tourists, we're inheritors of an idea. That beauty, when rooted in truth, becomes timeless. Step inside an ancient Hindu temple, and you're not just entering a building, you're stepping into a living diagram of the universe. Every pillar, every carving, every shadow is a deliberate echo of cosmic harmony. Take the towering gopurams of South India, their surfaces teeming with deities and dancers. These aren't mere decorations, they're visual hymns, ascending toward the heavens in precise tiers that mirror the layers of existence. At their core lies the Vastu Purusha mandala, a sacred grid that dictated every temple's layout. Imagine a giant geometric blueprint laid over the earth, with squares representing energy channels and the temple's central shrine marking the spot where divine and earthly forces converge. This wasn't just architecture, it was alchemy in stone. The magic unfolds in the details. Walk through the corridors of the Brihadiswara temple, and you'll notice something uncanny. No matter where you stand, the main Shiva lingam is always visible, its presence uninterrupted by pillars. This optical feat wasn't luck, it was geometry wielded like a spiritual tool. Builders used fractal scaling, where smaller shrines around the main sanctum repeat its proportions, creating a ripple effect that draws the eye inward. Even the temple's height follows strict ratios based on Vedic mathematics, with measurements derived from the movements of planets and stars. The result: a structure that doesn't just honor the gods but embodies their rhythms. Then there are the yantras, those intricate geometric diagrams etched into temple floors or hidden in sanctums. To the untrained eye, they might look like elaborate art, but these were cosmic blueprints, each line and intersection charged with meaning. The Sri Yantra, with its interlocking triangles, wasn't just a symbol, it was a meditation device, its proportions so precise that modern studies show its patterns can induce altered states of consciousness. Temples often aligned these yantras with celestial events during equinoxes. Sunlight would slide across carvings to illuminate specific points, turning stone into a celestial clock. But perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the temple's purpose. They weren't built to impress, they were designed to transform. The labyrinthine passages of the Meenakshi temple, for instance, force pilgrims to walk in spirals, symbolizing the soul's winding journey toward enlightenment. Even the act of circumambulating the sanctum mirrored the planet's orbits, merging individual devotion with cosmic order. Today, when visitors run their hands over the worn carvings of dancing gods or pause where sunlight paints golden triangles on the floor, they're touching more than history. They're connecting to a vision where every chisel stroke was a prayer and every measurement, a whispered conversation with the infinite. From the dusty plains of southern Peru, the Nazca Lines stretch across nearly 200 square miles of desert like a giant sketchbook left open to the sky. These enormous geoglyphs, some stretching over 1,000 feet long, aren't just random scratches on the earth. They form hummingbirds, spiders, monkeys, even a figure nicknamed the astronaut, all etched with such precision that their full beauty only reveals itself from hundreds of feet above. But that's the puzzle. Created between 500 BCE and 500 CE, these designs were made by people who couldn't possibly have seen them from the air. So why pour such painstaking effort into art meant for gods, or maybe the cosmos itself? One theory points to the stars. The Nazca people, like many ancient cultures, were keen astronomers. Certain lines align with solstice sunrises, while others may trace celestial events like the Pleiades clusters rising. The spider glyph, for instance, closely resembles a species whose mating habits sync with seasonal rains, a living almanac carved into the earth. Could these have been a giant agricultural calendar, helping farmers predict floods and droughts? Others suggest the lines marked sacred pathways for rituals, where processions followed the figures to commune with spirits or ancestors. Imagine walking the spiral of a serpent's tail, each step a meditation, the desert itself a temple without walls. Then there's the shamanic vision theory. Anthropologists note that many shapes mirror hallucinations induced by sacred plants like Huachuma cactus. The straight lines might represent spirit ropes, linking this world to the next, while animals like the hummingbird, a creature tied to resurrection in Andean lore, could symbolize soul journeys. Perhaps the Nazca didn't need physical flight to see their work. Maybe they traveled in trances, tracing what their spirits witnessed above. The methods of creation deepen the mystery. Without drones or blueprints, how did they scale up designs so flawlessly? Researchers found small-scale models nearby, suggesting they used grids or ropes to transfer patterns. Workers would have removed the desert's dark top layer, exposing lighter soil beneath, a technique preserving the lines for millennia. But the real marvel is their endurance. In a place where winds scour the land and rains are rare, these fragile scratches have survived 2,000 years. It's as if the desert agreed to collaborate, holding their secrets in place. Today, the Nazca Lines challenge our assumptions about art and purpose. They weren't meant to hang in galleries or adorn palaces. Their very invisibility from the ground suggests a different kind of value, one tied to faith, knowledge, or cosmic dialogue. When you stand beside a hummingbird glyph, its wings wider than a Boeing jet, you're not just looking at a drawing. You're witnessing a conversation across time, where people turn the earth itself into a canvas for the unseen. And perhaps that's the lesson. True meaning doesn't always need an audience. Sometimes it's enough to send a message into the sky, trusting that something or someone will understand. Egyptian hieroglyphs don't just decorate temple walls, they hum with life. Each symbol, from the poised heron to the coiled serpent, was more than a letter, it was a vessel of power. Picture a priest tracing his finger over a column of glyphs in the dim glow of an oil lamp. To him, these weren't mere words. The ibis could represent Thoth, god of wisdom, while the Ankh symbol breathed the very concept of life into stone. But here's the revelation: hieroglyphs weren't just sacred art or simple writing. They were a fusion of both, designed to be seen and understood on multiple levels by the living, the gods, and the dead. Take the Rosetta Stone's discovery in 1799. This slab of black basalt, etched with the same decree in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs, became the key to unlocking Egypt's secrets. But what's often overlooked is why the script was so impenetrable for centuries. Hieroglyphs operated like a layered code. Some signs stood for sounds, like our alphabet. Others represented whole words or ideas, and sometimes a glyph's placement could change its meaning entirely. A falcon might spell the name Horus, or it could evoke the god's protective presence, depending on context. This wasn't inefficiency, it was intentional complexity, a way to weave multiple meanings into a single line. Temples like Karnak turned hieroglyphs into architectural symphonies. Every column, every lintel pulsed with meticulously arranged symbols. Cartouche's oval frames enclosing royal names weren't just labels, they were magical shields, ensuring a pharaoh's identity would endure in the afterlife. Colors deepened the magic: green for fertility, red for chaos, gold for eternity. Each hue charged the words with extra potency. Even the direction the glyphs faced mattered. In tomb inscriptions, they often faced right, guiding the deceased toward the western realm of the dead. This wasn't writing as we know it. It was a cosmic GPS, etched in pigment and stone. But hieroglyphs did more than guide, they transformed. Spells from the Book of the Dead, penned in flawless glyphs, were meant to animate in the underworld. A painted offering formula could magically sustain a spirit with bread and beer for millennia. The very act of carving a god's name in a temple wall was believed to summon their presence. Modern eyes see static art. Ancient Egyptians saw living conduits. Today, when we puzzle over these intricate symbols in museums, it's easy to admire them as beautiful relics. But their true genius lies in their duality. They were practical enough to record tax receipts, yet mystical enough to converse with deities. They preserved harvest yields alongside hymns to the stars. In a world without divide between secular and sacred, hieroglyphs became the ultimate fusion, where a single stroke could be both poetry and prayer, history and spell. They remind us that language at its highest purpose isn't just about communication, it's about creation. Greek sculptors didn't carve statues, they chased divinity with chisels. Walk through the halls of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, and you'll witness an evolution frozen in marble. The early Kuroi, those stiff, wide-eyed youth statues from the 6th century BC, stand like echoes of Egyptian rigidity, arms pinned to their sides, 1 foot forward, faces locked in serene anonymity. But within 200 years, something extraordinary happened. The stone began to breathe, muscles flexed, drapery fluttered. By the time Myron sculpted his Discobolus in the 5th century BC, the human form wasn't just depicted, it was alive with potential, coiled in mid-motion as if the god Apollo himself had paused mid-throw. This revolution wasn't just artistic, it was spiritual. The Greeks believed perfection wasn't an abstract ideal. It lived in the harmony of proportion, the balance of strength and grace. Take Polykleitos Dorophoros, the spear-bearer. Every inch of his body follows the sculptor's secret formula, the canon, where the length of the head fits 7 times into the total height, and the curve of the hip counterbalances the tilt of the shoulders. This wasn't vanity, it was sacred geometry. To the Greeks, a perfectly proportioned body mirrored the order of the cosmos, a testament to the god's own design. Even the slight contrapposto stance weight shifted onto one leg created an invisible S-curve that pulsed with divine rhythm. Yet the true genius lay in the details. Study the veins on the arm of the Apollo Belvedere or the tension in the toes of the Artemision bronze, and you'll realize these weren't generic ideals. Sculptors like Praxiteles studied athletes in the gymnasium, capturing the ripple of a tendon or the fold of skin over a rib. But then they went further, enhancing, refining, distilling the essence of humanity into something transcendent. The famous wet drapery style clinging to the goddesses of the Parthenon wasn't just technical bravura. It made marble seem to dissolve, revealing the celestial bodies beneath. What's mesmerizing is how these statues functioned in daily life. They weren't gallery pieces but votive offerings, standing in temples where worshippers might glimpse a god's likeness. The colossal gold and ivory statue of Zeus at Olympia, one of the seven wonders, wasn't just art, it was a conduit. Pilgrims swore the god's eyes followed them, his presence so palpable that the historian Strabo wrote of visitors weeping at the sight. Even broken statues held power. The Nike of Samothrace, her wings still beating though her head is lost, wasn't just a victory monument. She was the embodiment of triumph itself, carved to appear alighting on a ship's prow, her wet robes pressed against her body by the sea wind. The legacy of Greek statuary lingers in every Michelangelo, every Rodin. But perhaps its greatest lesson is this: the pursuit of perfection wasn't about escaping humanity, it was about revealing the divine within it. When we stand before these works today, we're not just admiring skill, we're witnessing the moment art became a bridge between Earth and Olympus, where mortal hands dared to shape the ineffable. And in that tension between the real and the ideal, the human and the godlike, we find the heartbeat of an entire civilization. Step into the Hagia Sophia as it stood in the 6th century, and you wouldn't just see mosaics, you'd drown in light. Millions of tiny glass tessera, each backed with gold leaf, transformed the dome into a living canopy of stars. This was no mere decoration. Byzantine artisans weren't illustrating heaven. They were reconstructing it on Earth using physics as much as faith. The secret lay in their materials. Unlike opaque stone or pigment, their glass cubes captured and multiplied light, shimmering differently with every flicker of candle flame or shift of the sun. A single mosaic could shift from emerald to amber as you walked past, as if the very walls were breathing with divine presence. The golden background of these works wasn't just lavish, it was theological calculus. Gold, to Byzantine thinkers, represented the uncreated light of God, a substance beyond earthly corruption. By setting figures like the Pantocrator Christ against these radiant fields, artists visually proclaimed a staggering idea that the sacred existed outside time and space. Notice how the figures seemed to float, their feet barely grazing the ground. Proportions defied realism, elongated hands, oversized eyes, not from lack of skill, but by design. These distortions weren't failures of perspective, they were gateways to the metaphysical. A massive Christ in the apse might dwarf the saints beside him, not to show physical size, but spiritual hierarchy. Ravenna's Basilica of San Vitale holds one of the most sophisticated examples. In its choir, Emperor Justinian and Empress Theodora stand frozen in procession, their jeweled robes glinting with lapis and mother of pearl. But look closer. Their halos aren't flat discs, they're constructed like sunbursts with staggered cubes, creating a vibration effect that makes the gold appear to pulse. The figures don't interact, they exist in a suspended moment, participants in an eternal liturgy where past, present, and future collapse. This was the Mosaicist's genius, using abstraction to convey truths beyond narrative. The technique itself bordered on alchemy. Craftsmen mixed gold leaf between layers of glass, then cut the cooled sheets into cubes at precise angles to maximize reflectivity. Some tessera were even slightly convex, acting like microscopic mirrors to scatter light. In the mausoleum of Galla Placidia, midnight blue mosaics embedded with gold create the illusion of a starry sky. But lean closer, and you'll spot the Christian cross woven subtly into the celestial patterns. Every material choice carried meaning. Red glass colored with gold chloride echoed Christ's sacrifice. Green symbolized renewal, white purity. What's extraordinary is how these mosaics functioned in worship. As congregants moved through candlelit spaces, the images seemed to animate, eyes following, hands gesturing, robes rippling. This wasn't passive viewing, it was participatory theater. The flickering light created a kinetic experience, as if the heavenly court was present in real time. Modern visitors to Ravenna's basilicas still report this uncanny effect standing beneath the apse mosaic of Sant'Apollinare in Classe, where the transfigured Christ hovers in a starry mandorla. Many describe feeling the boundary between earth and heaven grow thin. Byzantine mosaics ultimately achieved what no naturalistic art could. They didn't imitate reality, they proposed an alternative one. Where Greek statues celebrated the perfection of flesh, these glittering surfaces denied materiality altogether, suggesting a realm where bodies were made of light and time stood still. In an age before electricity, they manufactured radiance, turning architecture into a threshold between worlds. Today, when sunlight slants through the windows of the Kora Church in Istanbul, setting its 14th century mosaics ablaze, we're not just looking at medieval art. We're witnessing the moment craftsmanship became conjuring and pigment quite literally turned to glory. In the hushed quiet of a mosque, sunlight filters through stained glass, catching the elegant curves of words spiraling across walls and domes. This isn't mere decoration, it's Islamic calligraphy, where writing transcends communication to become an act of devotion. Unlike other scripts, Arabic letters weren't just tools for record-keeping, they were vessels for the divine. When the Quran was revealed in the 7th century, its words were considered so sacred that transcribing them became a spiritual practice. Scribes didn't just write, they prayed with their pens, turning each stroke into an offering. The magic lies in the script's duality. At first glance, the swirling Thuluth style or the angular Kufic script might seem purely aesthetic, but look closer. Every dot and line follows strict geometric rules, their proportions calculated like celestial harmonies. A single letter's curve might mirror the arc of a crescent moon, while the spacing between words echoes the rhythmic pulse of recited prayers. This precision wasn't arbitrary, it reflected the Islamic belief that beauty and truth were inseparable, the arabesque patterns twining around Quranic verses. They weren't idle flourishes, those endless, interlacing vines symbolized the infinite nature of God's creation. Their unbroken flow a visual echo of Tawhid, the oneness of the divine. Master calligraphers trained for decades, grinding inks from precious minerals and trimming reed pens with rituals akin to preparing for prayer. The great Ottoman calligrapher Sheikh Hamdullah would purify himself before writing, treating each page as sacred ground. His masterpiece mushafs, handwritten Qurans, were so revered they were said to glow in dim light, their gold leaf accents capturing candle flames like miniature suns. But the true test of skill wasn't just beauty, it was legibility. A single misformed letter could alter a verse's meaning, so every stroke carried the weight of spiritual responsibility. Beyond manuscripts, calligraphy transformed architecture. The Blue Mosque in Istanbul wraps visitors in a cocoon of Quranic verses, their letters flowing upward toward the dome as if ascending to heaven. In Andalusia's Alhambra, walls whisper Allah's 99 names in delicate stucco, the script so fluid they seem to grow from the stone itself. Even functional objects became holy canvases. Brass astrolabes bore celestial inscriptions, while ceramic tiles carried benedictions for homes. What's extraordinary is how calligraphy blurred the line between art and worship. Sufi mystics practiced writing meditation, tracing letters as a path to spiritual ecstasy. The repeated strokes of Bismillah, in the name of God, could induce trance-like focus, turning the page into a portal. Modern science now confirms what these scribes knew instinctively. The rhythmic, repetitive motions of calligraphy lower heart rates and still the mind, much like chanting or prayer. Today, when we admire a Persian miniatures marginalia or the grand calligraphic panels of Cairo's mosques, we're witnessing more than craftsmanship. We're seeing a tradition that refused to separate the sacred from the scribe's hand. Each curve of ink is a testament to an idea that words, when infused with reverence, can become bridges between earth and eternity. For the ancient Chinese, jade wasn't just a stone, it was a piece of the cosmos made tangible. Unlike gold or silver, which were valued for their luster, jade was treasured for something far deeper, its ability to channel Kai, the vital breath of the universe. Scratch the surface of a 3,000-year-old disk, its milky green surface polished to a glow, and you're not just holding an artifact, you're touching a philosophy. These flat, circular stones with central holes weren't mere ornaments. They symbolized the heavens, their perfect shapes reflecting the ancient belief that jade could bridge the earthly and celestial realms. The most astonishing testament to this reverence lies in the jade burial suits of the Han Dynasty. Picture this, a high-ranking noble prepared for the afterlife, their body encased head to toe in hundreds of rectangular jade plaques, each drilled with tiny holes and threaded with gold or silver wire. Creating these suits required staggering resources, sometimes thousands of hours of labor to shape and assemble the stones. But why go to such length? The answer whispers through time. Jade was believed to preserve the body from decay, its dense, cool essence locking the soul's energy in place. Emperors like Liu Sheng, whose jade suit was discovered intact in the Mancheng tombs, weren't just buried in finery, they were armored for eternity. Ritual objects reveal even more layers. The Kong, those enigmatic tubes with square exteriors and cylindrical cores, puzzled archaeologists for decades. Their purpose, likely ceremonial vessels, their geometric perfection embodying the harmony of earth square and heaven round. Carved dragons coiled around jade pendants weren't decorations but guardians, their sinuous forms channeling protective energies. Even the tools used to work jade held spiritual weight. Craftsmen employed sand and bamboo drills, their slow, deliberate process mirroring the patient cultivation of virtue that jade itself symbolized. What's mesmerizing is how jade's meaning evolved across dynasties. Early cultures like the Liangzhu associated it with shamanic power, while Confucian scholars later likened its unyielding yet polished nature to the ideal gentleman. The stone's subtle musical qualities struck gently. It rings with a pure, lingering tone, made it sacred in rituals. Emperors held jade tablets to communicate with heaven, and nobles sipped from jade cups believing the stone purified their wine. Today, when we admire a Ming dynasty jade cabbage with its lifelike veins or a king vase so thin it glows like moonlight, we're witnessing more than artistry. These objects carry the weight of a civilization's deepest hopes, that something as humble as stone could hold the secret to immortality, harmony, and the soul's unbreakable bond with the universe. To hold jade is to feel that dream still alive, pressed cool and smooth against your palm. Only 4 Mayan codices survived the Spanish conquest, their pages of amate bark paper folded like delicate accordions, each painted with the precision of a cosmic scribe. These weren't mere books, they were portals to the heavens, where gods and numbers danced in vivid reds, blues, and ochres. Take the Dresden Codex, its 74 pages filled with deities perched atop celestial bars, their bodies twisted into the shapes of constellations. One section tracks Venus with astonishing accuracy, predicting its appearances over 500 years with an error margin of just 2 hours. Imagine the patience required to observe those cycles across generations, translating the planet's shimmering path into painted glyphs that doubled as sacred incantations. The Codices reveal a mindset where time wasn't linear but layered. The Mayan long count calendar didn't just mark days, it wove together cycles within cycles. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred round, intertwined with a 365-day hob to create a 52-year calendar round. But the true marvel was their ability to sync these with celestial events. A page from the Madrid Codex shows the maize god resurrecting alongside rainfall patterns, linking agriculture to the Pleiades rising. This wasn't poetry, it was survival encoded in pigment. When the Pleiades appeared in April, farmers knew the rains would follow, and the Codex's almanacs, zigzagging tables of dates and deities, guided them like a divine farmer's almanac. Color itself held power. The brilliant Maya blue, made from indigo bonded to palagoscite clay, wasn't chosen for its beauty alone. It replicated the hues of the sacred sky and water, turning each codex into a miniature cosmos. Glyphs for star Ek often appeared alongside those for mirror Nen, suggesting the Maya saw the night sky as a reflective surface, a portal where scribes could commune with ancestors. Even the act of painting was ritual. Brushes were made from human hair, and pigments mixed with tree sap became offerings as they dried. What's haunting is how these books bridge the practical and the prophetic. Eclipse tables in the Dresden Codex warned of celestial omens, while childbirth almanacs in the Paris Codex paired dates with protective deities. A single page could guide a midwife through labor and a priest through Venus's next disappearance. Today, as scholars painstakingly scan these fragile pages with multispectral imaging, uncovering hidden layers of text, we're not just recovering lost knowledge. We're relearning a language where astronomy, art, and prayer were one and the same, a reminder that the sky was never silent to those who knew how to listen. Rising from medieval towns like stone forests, Gothic cathedrals were more than buildings, they were physical prayers, their spires straining toward heaven with an urgency that still takes our breath away. Walk into Chartres or Notre Dame, and you're immediately swallowed by something inexplicable. The weight of the stone vanishes as your eyes climb those ribbed vaults, tracing paths of light from stained glass to polished floor. This was the Gothic Revolution, architecture that didn't just house the sacred but enacted it, turning physics into theology and geometry into revelation. Take the flying buttresses, those delicate-looking stone arms bracing the walls. They weren't just engineering solutions, they were visual sermons. By transferring the roof's weight outward, they allowed walls to dissolve into vast windows, transforming solid stone into curtains of colored light. The message was clear: divine truth couldn't be contained. At Sistine Chapel in Paris, 15 towering windows contain over 1,000 biblical scenes, bathing visitors in a kaleidoscope of rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. On a sunny morning, the effect is otherworldly. Light doesn't just enter the space. It becomes the space, shimmering across gold leaf and pooled on the floor like liquid jewels. Every measurement hummed with hidden meaning. The number 5, representing Christ's wounds, might determine a chapel's proportions. 12 apostles could be echoed in 12 columns. Even the labyrinth inlaid in Chartres' floor, a winding path once traversed on knees by pilgrims, mirrored both the journey to Jerusalem and the celestial orbits. Then there were the gargoyles, those grotesque figures perched on rain spouts. Far from mere decoration, they embodied a medieval worldview. Demons lurked at the edges of holiness, kept at bay by the sacred geometry within. The true genius lay in how these cathedrals engaged all senses. Gregorian chants resonated through acoustically perfected naves, their harmonies bouncing off precise ratios of wall to ceiling height. Incense curled upward through shafts of light, turning air itself into a visible offering. Pilgrims could read biblical stories by touching sculpted capitals or following the light's daily path across zodiac motifs inlaid in the floor, a cosmic clock where noon marked Christ's triumph at the center. What's astonishing is how quickly this style spread. Within a century, techniques developed at St. Denis Abbey vaulted across Europe, adapted by local craftsmen who added their own flourishes. English cathedrals stretched longer, their naves like processional pathways. German builders pushed spires taller, their filigreed stonework dissolving into sky. Yet all shared that same Gothic heartbeat, an insistence that beauty and belief weren't separate pursuits, but two sides of the same sacred coin. Today, when we crane our necks to follow a vault's ascent or trace a rose window's petals with our fingers, we're not just admiring medieval skill. We're participating in an ancient conversation, one where light equals divinity, proportion equals harmony, and stone, against all logic, learns to fly. Turn the page of a 15th century Persian manuscript, and you'll step into a world where every brushstroke hums with hidden meaning. These miniature paintings, some no larger than your palm, aren't just illustrations, they're visual hymns, marrying the precision of astronomy with the passion of Sufi poetry. Take a scene from Nizami's Layla and Majnun. The star-crossed lovers might be framed by a garden so meticulously rendered that botanists can identify each flower species, while above them, constellations align exactly as they would have appeared on the night the poem was composed. This wasn't artistic license, it was cosmology in pigment. The secret lies in the colors. Persian miniaturists worked from a sacred palette. Lapis lazuli blue, ground from Afghan stones worth their weight in gold, represented divinity's infinite expanse. Earth tones came from crushed pomegranate skins or saffron, anchoring scenes in mortal reality. But the real alchemy happened in the margins, those intricate geometric borders resembling lace. These weren't mere decoration, they mirrored the tessellating patterns of Islamic sacred geometry, a visual echo of the universe's underlying order. A single rose might repeat in tessellations, its petals decreasing in size toward the center, drawing the eye inward like a meditation on the infinite. Sufi mysticism breathes through these works. In a depiction of Rumi's whirling dervishes, the dancers' swirling robes dissolve into abstract patterns, blurring the line between human form and cosmic energy. The gold leaf illuminating their halos isn't just gilding, it's a visual metaphor for the divine light Sufis believed permeated all creation. Even the empty spaces held meaning. Unlike Western art that feared voids, Persian miniatures used negative space to suggest the ineffable, the unsayable presence of God hovering just beyond the painted edge. What's extraordinary is how these tiny masterpieces functioned as multisensory experiences. Poets like Hafez wrote verses to accompany specific paintings, their metaphors mirrored in the imagery. A nightingale painted beside a rose wasn't just pretty, it evoked the soul's longing for union with the divine, a theme repeated in the calligraphy snaking around the border. Some manuscripts even included musical notation, turning into a performance where sight, sound, and sacred text intertwined. Today, these miniatures challenge our modern divide between art and science. The same artist who mixed pigments from meteorite dust might have consulted astronomical charts to plot a scene's celestial backdrop. When you peer closely at a 16th century hunting scene, The falcon's trajectory follows the exact parabolic arc described by Persian mathematicians centuries before Newton. Here, a prince's robe isn't just crimson, it's dyed with iron oxide from a specific region believed to channel protective energies. Every decision, from a sparrow's wing angled to the fractal repetition of tilework, whispered of a universe where love, physics, and prayer were threads of the same golden tapestry. Holding a facsimile of the Shahnameh or a folio from the Divan of Hafez, we're not just looking at art, we're holding a key to a worldview where beauty was the language of truth and the smallest detail, a bee hovering near a blossom, a single teardrop rendered in mother of pearl, could contain the entire cosmos. In the royal courts of Benin and If, molten bronze didn't just take shape, it took on a life of its own. Picture the scene, a clay mold, painstakingly carved with the features of a king, now cracked away to reveal a face so lifelike it seemed to breathe. These weren't mere portraits, they were vessels of divine authority crafted through the lost wax method, a process so intricate it bordered on alchemy. Artisans would sculpt a king's likeness in beeswax, layer it with clay, then fire it until the wax drained away, leaving a hollow throne for liquid metal. The result, bronze heads with eyes that held the weight of dynasties, their lips parted as if mid-proclamation. The If heads, some dating back to the 12th century, still startle with their naturalism. Delicate striations along the scalp mimic actual hairstyles, while the faintest asymmetry in the cheeks suggests a living subject. But realism wasn't the goal, it was resonance. These bronzes anchored the sacred bond between ruler and realm. When an Uni of If died, his successor would commission a head to house the departed king's spirit, ensuring his wisdom still guided the kingdom. The hollowed necks often supported wooden bodies dressed in regalia, turning sculpture into a participant in court rituals. Imagine the impact, a council gathered around a bronze ancestor, seeking counsel as if the metal itself could speak. Benin's bronzes took this further, weaving history into every relief. The famed plaques adorning the Oba's palace didn't just depict battles, they were cosmic ledgers. Portuguese traders, their hats meticulously detailed, stood alongside leopards symbolizing royal power, all flattened into a single plane that ignored European perspective. Why? Because these weren't snapshots of events, they were layers of time compressed. A single plaque might show a victory feast while subtly encoding the astronomical alignment that made it possible, blending the ephemeral and the eternal. The casting process itself was a ritual. Ore from the Niger Delta was smelted in furnaces fueled by sacred incantations. Pouring the bronze required silence. A single misspoken word could fracture the mold's sanctity. And when the metal cooled, artisans would polish the surface with herbs believed to awaken its spiritual potency. These weren't craftsmen. They were intermediaries, translating mortal authority into a language the ancestors could recognize. Today, when we stand before an If head in a museum, we're not just seeing art, we're witnessing the moment a civilization redefined power, not as force, but as continuity. The faint sheen on a Benin leopard's flank isn't just metal catching light. It's the glow of 1,000 conversations between the living, the dead, and the divine. These bronzes remind us that true leadership isn't carved in stone, it's cast in fire, shaped by hands that understood governance as the ultimate act of creation. Standing tall against the Pacific Northwest mist, totem poles rise like sentinels of memory, their cedar surfaces alive with bears, ravens, and thunderbirds stacked in silent conversation. These towering carvings weren't mere decorations, they were the libraries of the Tlingit, Haida, and Kwakwaka'wakwa peoples, each figure a chapter in a story far older than written words. Take the iconic raven perched at the top of many poles, trickster and creator in one, His beak might cradle the moon in one legend or scatter sunlight to form rivers in another. Below him, a bear with outstretched claws could represent a clan's founding ancestor, while the looping curves of a killer whale at the base might chart a family's migration across the islands. Every animal, every curve held meaning, transforming cedar into a three-dimensional epic. The process of carving was as sacred as the stories themselves. Master carvers didn't just select any tree, they searched for the perfect red cedar, one that had grown straight and strong for centuries. Before the first cut, prayers were offered to the tree's spirit, acknowledging its sacrifice. Using adzes and chisels made from elk antler and ironwood, the carver would work from the bottom up, bringing the pole's narrative to life in a sequence meant to be read from ground to sky. Paint came from nature's palette, charcoal black for raven's feathers, ochre red from iron-rich clay, and the luminous blue-green of copper minerals. But the true magic lay in the ceremony when the pole was raised. Hundreds would gather as ropes woven from cedar bark slowly lifted the ton-heavy pole into place, while elders chanted the histories it would now preserve for generations. Some poles served as territorial markers, their crest animals declaring a family's rights to fishing grounds or berry patches. Others, like the rare mortuary poles, held the remains of chiefs in carved compartments high above the earth, closer to the spirit world. The most powerful were shame poles, erected to publicly recount a rival's broken promises, like the legendary Lincoln pole in Alaska, where a figure with a tall hat represented a U.S. government agent who reneged on a treaty. Over time, the elements would reclaim these poles, the cedar softening back into the earth in a cycle as natural as the stories they carried. Today, when a new pole is raised in communities like Heidelberg or Alert Bay, it's more than revival, it's resilience. Modern carvers blend traditional designs with contemporary stories, some even embedding glass or metal alongside carved figures. Museums now work with tribes to repatriate stolen poles, recognizing them not as artifacts but as living records. When you stand before a totem, you're not just seeing wood and paint. You're witnessing a language without alphabets, where a wolf's howl, a whale's dive, and an eagle's flight intertwine to say what words alone cannot. That memory, when carved deep enough, becomes immortal. Turn the vellum page of the Book of Kells, and you'll find yourself staring not just at a Bible, but at a universe in ink. Created around the year 800 on the remote island of Iona, this illuminated manuscript doesn't merely transcribe scripture. It transforms it into a living tapestry where letters twist into serpents, apostles float in seas of interlacing gold, and entire gospels unfold in colors so vibrant they seem to pulse. The famous Cairo page, with its explosion of spirals and beasts swirling around Christ's monogram, isn't just decoration. It's a visual hymn, each curve a meditation on the infinite. What makes these pages extraordinary is how they merge precision with mystery. Celtic scribes used compasses and grids to plot their designs, yet the result feels organic, like vines growing across the parchment. The intricate knotwork, with its unbroken lines looping endlessly, wasn't just artistic flair. It mirrored the Celtic belief in eternity, where time wasn't linear but cyclical, and divinity wove through all things. Zoom in on a single capital letter, and you might spot a menagerie, otters catching fish, cats stalking birds, even moths drawn to the light of the script itself. These weren't doodles, they were theological arguments. A moth near a candle could symbolize the soul's longing for God, while intertwined dogs might represent the unity of secular and sacred. The pigments alone tell a story of global devotion. Ultramarine blue, ground from Afghan lapis lazuli, traveled farther than most pilgrims ever would. Green from malachite, red from crushed insects, each hue was chosen not just for beauty but for symbolism. Gold leaf, applied with breath so delicate the vellum wouldn't warp, didn't just illuminate the text, it manifested divine light on the page. Even the mistakes hold meaning. In one margin, a scribe's doodle of a monk reclining with a writing tablet feels startlingly human, a reminder that these celestial pages were made by hands that ached, eyes that strained, and spirits that sought transcendence through every stroke. But the Book of Kells is more than art. It's a scientific artifact. Some pages align with astronomical events. Certain decorated initials mark solstices or eclipses mentioned in the text. The carpet pages, with their geometric precision, could double as mathematical diagrams, their symmetry echoing the ratios of musical harmonies or the growth patterns of seashells. This wasn't an accident. To the monks, math and faith were two languages for the same truth. A perfectly measured spiral could lead the eye and the soul toward contemplation as surely as a psalm. Today, when visitors to Trinity College Dublin crowd around the glass case, they're not just seeing a medieval relic, they're witnessing a crossroads where a monk's quill became a bridge between earth and heaven, where every color, creature, and curve whispered the same promise, that the divine could be held in the palm of your hand, if only you knew how to look. Picture a Tibetan monk crouched over a wooden platform, his metal funnel gently tapping as colored sand cascades into intricate patterns. This is how mandalas begin not as art, but as sacred architecture for the soul. Each grain of sand is placed with the precision of a mathematician and the devotion of a poet, building a cosmic map that guides meditation. The outer walls might represent the universe's boundaries, while concentric circles within lead the eye, and the practitioners focus toward a center that symbolizes enlightenment. But here's the paradox: these stunning creations, sometimes weeks in the making, are ultimately swept away in a ritual reminding us that beauty, like life, is fleeting. The designs follow ancient prescriptions passed down through generations in texts called sadhanas. A single mandala might encode dozens of deities in geometric forms: squares for earth, triangles for fire, lotus petals for purity, all radiating from a central point like ripples in a pond. The colors aren't arbitrary either. White sand represents wisdom, red for life force, blue for infinity. Monks memorize these symbols as languages, where every curve whispers a lesson. As they work, their chants vibrate through the space, aligning the physical act of creation with inner transformation. What's most profound isn't the mandala's completion, it's its dissolution. After days of meticulous labor, monks gather in ceremony, brushing the sand into a jar to be poured into flowing water. This ritual, called Dul Ten, isn't destruction, it's a masterclass in non-attachment. The act teaches that clinging to permanence is an illusion, whether in sand or in life. The jar's contents might bless a river carrying prayers to the ocean, just as the memory of the mandala lingers in the mind long after its form is gone. Modern science has begun to echo what monks knew centuries ago. Studies show that creating or even viewing mandalas lowers stress hormones, their symmetrical patterns triggering the brain's relaxation response. Hospitals now use mandala coloring books in therapy, proving that these ancient tools still heal. Yet for all their adaptability, their core remains unchanged, an invitation to pause, breathe, and remember that even the most elaborate patterns, like our own lives, are both precious and transient. When you next see a mandala, whether in a museum or on a yoga studio wall, look beyond the surface. Those intricate lines are more than design, they're a roadmap to stillness, written in the universal language of shape and color. And the empty space at their center, that's the most important part, a silent reminder that sometimes the deepest truths aren't found in what's built up, but in what we're willing to let go. Carved from a single block of basalt weighing over 24 tons, the Aztec sun stone looms as a monumental puzzle, one part timepiece, one part cosmic map, and one part divine drama frozen in stone. At first glance, its intricate concentric circles might resemble abstract art, but every glyph and figure pulses with meaning, threading together the Mexica people's understanding of time, destiny, and the fragile balance of existence. The outer ring, adorned with fiery solar rays, isn't just decoration, it's the boundary between the known world and the chaos beyond, a reminder that order must be actively maintained through ritual and sacrifice. Central to the stone's design is the face of Tanatia, the sun god, his tongue protruding like a flint knife. This isn't a passive portrait, it's a demand. According to Mexica belief, the sun required nourishment, human blood, to keep moving across the sky. The four squares surrounding Tanatia represent the previous eras, or suns, each destroyed by cataclysms like jaguars, hurricanes, and fiery rains. Here, the stone becomes a historical archive, encoding the cyclical nature of time itself. The current era, Nahui Olan 4 movement, is destined to end in earthquakes unless humanity sustains the gods through offerings. Delve deeper, and the stone reveals its genius as a calendar. The inner rings track the Tonal Pohuale, the sacred 260-day cycle used for divination, and the Zu Pohuale, the 365-day solar year. Together, these interlocking cycles formed a 52-year calendar round, a span so significant that its completion triggered the new fire ceremony. Imagine the terror and hope of that night, all fires extinguished, hearts pounding as priests watched the Pleiades. If the stars crossed the zenith, it meant the world would continue and a new flame, lit in a sacrificial victim's chest, would relight civilization. The stone's glyphs guided these rituals, turning astronomy into a matter of survival. Yet the sunstone's power wasn't just in its precision, it was in its storytelling. The band of 20-day signs, from crocodile to flower, didn't merely mark time, they linked daily life to the divine. A child born on the day, Oslotl jaguar, might inherit the animal's cunning, while Quiahuatl rain could bless a farmer's harvest. Even the stone's material whispered of sacred geography, its volcanic origin echoing the Mexica belief that mountains were vessels of cosmic energy. Today, when we stand before this colossal disk in Mexico City's National Museum of Anthropology, we're not just seeing an artifact. We're witnessing a world, where time wasn't linear but a spiral, where the heavens and earth spoke through symbols, and where every dawn was a collective achievement bought with blood, yes, but also with an unwavering faith that humanity's rituals could shape the cosmos. The sunstone's message endures. Existence is a collaboration, and every moment balances on the edge of a knife. Before Filippo Brunelleschi demonstrated linear perspective with his famous peep show experiment in Florence's Piazza, artists struggled to capture space realistically. Paintings looked flat, figures stacked like paper dolls against gold backgrounds. Then came the break through a mathematical system where parallel lines converged at a single vanishing point, mimicking how the human eye perceives distance. This wasn't just an artistic trick, it was a philosophical revolution. Suddenly, the canvas became a window, and the divine could inhabit space as tangibly as flesh and blood. Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper showcases this transformation in breathtaking detail. The orthogonal lines of the ceiling beams and wall tapestries all funnel toward Christ's right temple, the literal vanishing point of the composition. This technical choice carries profound symbolism. The moment when Judas's betrayal is revealed becomes the focal point not just of the painting, but of cosmic history. The Apostles' receding table follows the same strict perspective. their gestures growing more dynamic as they near the edges, creating a spiral of emotion that pulls viewers into the drama. Even the landscape glimpsed through rear windows obeys perspective's laws, tying earthly and heavenly realms into one geometrically perfect continuum. What made Brunelleschi's discovery radical was its dual nature. On one level, it gave painters tools to construct illusionistic depth with compass and ruler. Masaccio's Holy Trinity fresco in Santa Maria Novella demonstrates this perfectly. The barrel vault's ribs diminish so precisely that contemporary viewers reportedly reached out to touch what appeared to be carved stone, only to find flat pigment. Yet perspective also reflected Renaissance humanism's core belief that mathematics governed both art and the universe. When Piero della Francesca painted his Flagellation of Christ, he positioned the architectural grid to align with harmonic ratios, suggesting Christ's suffering unfolded within an architecturally perfect, and therefore divinely ordained framework. The technique's spiritual implications unfolded across masterpieces. In Raphael's School of Athens, Aristotle and Plato stride beneath arches that recede into luminous distance, their philosophical debate framed by architecture echoing the Roman pantheon. Here, perspective becomes metaphor. Human reason, though majestic, has its vanishing point too, a horizon where human knowledge meets the infinite. Even the placement of figures held meaning. Botticelli's Annunciation uses a checkerboard floor to measure sacred space. The Virgin stands precisely 1/3 from the left, the golden ratio's sweet spot where divine intervention enters the material world. Yet perspective's greatest gift may have been its democratization of the sacred. No longer were holy figures relegated to gilded flatness. They walked in gardens with sloping terrain, their feet casting shadows on tiled floors. When Ghirlandaio painted the Magi's procession snaking through a Tuscan valley in the Sistine Chapel, ordinary Florentines saw biblical events unfolding in landscapes mirroring their own. This was art's new covenant. If God created the world with geometric perfection, then painting that world truthfully became an act of devotion. The canvas, governed by perspective's invisible threads, became a mirror of creation itself, finite in frame, infinite in implication. Hidden within the curling smoke of medieval laboratories, alchemists didn't just scribble notes, they painted visions where science and spirit fused into one. Unroll a brittle alchemical manuscript, and you'll find dragons swallowing their tails, kings dissolving in baths of acid, and suns coupling with moons in surreal embraces. These weren't fantasies, they were coded diagrams of a quest both chemical and cosmic. Take the famous green lion devouring the sun, a beast tearing apart a golden orb. To the uninitiated, it might seem like arcane mythology, but to an alchemist, this was precise instruction. The lion represented raw vitriol sulfuric acid, its corrosive jaws purifying gold ore in a process that mirrored the soul's purification through trials. Every bizarre image was a veil, hiding laboratory techniques from the unworthy while guiding adepts toward the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance said to transmute base metals into gold and grant eternal life. The symbolism ran deeper than mere secrecy. Alchemical illustrations operated on multiple planes simultaneously. A flask boiling over a flame might depict literal distillation, but the rising vapors also symbolized the aspirant's consciousness ascending toward enlightenment. The ubiquitous Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, wasn't just a symbol of cyclical chemical reactions. It embodied the alchemist's belief that destruction and rebirth were part of a single, eternal process. Even colors held alchemical meaning. The Negrido stage, represented by blackening matter in flasks, stood for putrefaction and the dissolution of the ego. Albedo, whitening, signaled purification, while rubedo, reddening, heralded the final union of opposites, the divine marriage of sulfur and mercury that birthed the stone. Some of the most profound allegories appeared in the Rosarium Philosophorum, a 16th century text where human figures enacted chemical transformations. In one woodcut, a king and queen stand waist-deep in water, their hands bound, a metaphor for the fixed king/sulfur and volatile queen/mercury principles locked in alchemical union. Later images show them dissolving into skeletons, then resurrecting as radiant androgynes. This wasn't just poetic license. It mirrored the actual stages of alloying metals, where compounds broke down and recombined. The message was clear: the laboratory and the soul were mirrors. As metals were refined, so too must the alchemist undergo spiritual death and rebirth. Modern eyes might dismiss these illustrations as pre-scientific oddities, but their legacy lingers. Carl Jung recognized alchemical symbols as blueprints of the psyche, their bizarre imagery mapping the unconscious mind's journey toward wholeness. Even the structure of the atom, with its orbiting electrons, eerily echoes alchemy's sun and moon motifs. When you trace a finger over these ancient pages, you're not just seeing outdated chemistry. You're witnessing the birth of experimental science, cloaked in a language where every retort and alembic held double meaning, where the quest to transform lead into gold was never just about metal, but about humanity's timeless hunger to reshape itself. The Rosetta Stone isn't just a slab of black basalt. It's a conversation frozen in time, a moment where three scripts collided to tear down the veil between worlds. Discovered in 1799 by French soldiers digging fortifications near the Nile Delta, this unassuming-looking rock held the key to a civilization that had been silent for millennia. On its surface, the same decree from 1960 BC was carved in three scripts: Greek at the bottom, Demotic in the middle, and hieroglyphs at the top. At first glance, it might seem like bureaucratic redundancy, an ancient version of posting a notice in multiple languages. But this stone was far more than a political announcement. It was a linguistic Rosetta Stone in the truest sense, a bridge between two ways of seeing the world. Greek, the language of Ptolemaic Egypt's rulers, was already well understood by scholars. Demotic, the everyday script of the people, was partially decipherable, but hieroglyphs, those intricate picture-like symbols, had been a mystery for over 1,000 years. For centuries, Europeans believed they were purely symbolic, each owl or lotus representing abstract ideas rather than sounds. Then came Jean-François Champollion, a French linguist obsessed with cracking the code. His breakthrough came when he realized hieroglyphs weren't just art or allegory. They were a hybrid system, blending phonetic signs with symbolic ones. The cartouche, an oval enclosing royal names, was his Rosetta Stone within the Rosetta Stone. By matching the Greek name, Ptolemy, to its hieroglyphic counterpart, he unlocked the first phonetic values, proving that these elegant pictures could also spell out foreign names sound by sound. But the stone's true magic lies in what it reveals about the intersection of art and language. Hieroglyphs weren't merely functional, they were sacred artistry. A single glyph could operate on multiple levels as a sound, a word, and a religious symbol. Their ankh, resembling a cross with a loop, didn't just mean life. It was believed to channel life's essence when carved into temple walls. The Jade pillar, stacked like a backbone, symbolized stability in both writing and ritual, often painted on coffins to fortify the dead. This wasn't writing as we know it today. It was a fusion of poetry, prayer, and power, where the act of inscribing was as holy as the message itself. Beyond linguistics, the Rosetta Stone embodies how science and humanities depend on one another. Champollion didn't work in isolation. he built on the work of physicists like Thomas Young, who used frequency analysis, a technique borrowed from cryptography, to identify recurring demotic patterns. The stone's discovery coincided with the birth of archaeology as a discipline, where art historians, linguists, and chemists began collaborating to piece together the past. Even its preservation tells a story. After Napoleon's defeat, the stone was surrendered to the British and eventually displayed in the British Museum, where it became a global symbol of shared cultural heritage rather than a spoil of war. Today, when we gaze at the Rosetta Stone's glass case in London, we're not just looking at a translation tool, we're witnessing humanity's relentless drive to understand itself across time. Every scratch on its surface is a reminder that writing isn't just about communication, it's about preservation, a way to shout across the centuries, "We were here." The stone's legacy echoes in modern efforts to digitize lost languages or decode Mayan glyphs. It challenges us to ask, what messages are we leaving behind, and will future generations need their own Rosetta Stone to hear us? The answer lies not just in the words we inscribe, but in the care we take to make sure they're never truly lost. A Renaissance masterpiece, darkened by centuries of candle soot, begins to breathe again as a conservator's laser pulses across its surface, each burst removing grime molecule by molecule without touching the original paint beneath. This is restoration at its most precise, where technology meets tradition to pull history back from the brink. Across the world, teams armed with 3D scanners and spectral imaging are performing similar miracles, reassembling shattered Assyrian reliefs from drone-mapped fragments, digitally unwrapping charred Roman scrolls too fragile to touch, even grafting lab-grown crystals onto eroded Mayan facades to match the original stone's molecular structure. Yet with every intervention comes a dilemma. How much should we erase time's fingerprints in our quest to revive the past? Take the Sistine Chapel's controversial 1980s restoration. When layers of glue and grime were stripped away, Michelangelo's ceiling exploded with neon-bright hues that shocked scholars. The vivid greens and pinks were a far cry from the muted tones generations had admired. Critics argued the cleaning was too aggressive, that centuries of patina held their own historical value. Defenders countered that we were finally seeing the artist's true vision, freed from the distortions of aging varnishes. Similar debates rage over the Parthenon marbles. Should laser-cleaned fragments in London be reunited with weather-worn originals in Athens, creating a jarring contrast? Or does each surface tell its own story of survival? Emerging technologies only deepen these questions. When Notre Dame's spire collapsed in flames in 2019, architects faced a crossroads: rebuild Viollet-le-Duc's 19th century design using traditional oak, or employ modern materials like carbon fiber to prevent future fires. The choice wasn't just practical, it was philosophical. Does authenticity lie in original materials or original forms? Meanwhile, our reconstructions now offer tantalizing what-ifs, like the digital colorization of Greek statues that reveals how shockingly polychrome they once were. But should we repaint actual antiquities, or let the ghostly white marble stand as a testament to how later generations imagined antiquity? Perhaps the most profound restoration happens beyond the physical. Linguists using machine learning are resurrecting dead languages from marginalia in medieval manuscripts, while light projection systems temporarily complete half-ruined frescoes for visitors, not to replace loss, but to make absence visible. In Palmyra, where ISIS dynamited ancient temples, 3D printed replicas now stand beside the rubble, not as erasures of tragedy, but as acts of defiance. Every decision carries weight. To restore is to reinterpret, to choose which version of history gets preserved. The true masterpiece isn't the object itself, but the conversation between what was, what is, and what could be, a dialogue as layered as the patina it seeks to preserve or remove. From pyramids to paintings, ancient masterpieces remind us that art was never just decoration. It was a dialogue between earth and cosmos, science and soul. These works challenge us to see creativity as a path to understanding life's deepest mysteries. What masterpiece speaks to you? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more journeys into history's hidden wonders. Standing before these ancient creations today, we're not just observers, we're participants in an unbroken conversation. The same awe that gripped a medieval pilgrim entering Chartres Cathedral still lingers when sunlight spills through its stained glass. The quiet reverence an Aztec priest felt while tracing the sunstone's glyphs echoes in the hushed voices of museum visitors. These works weren't made for galleries or textbooks. They were crafted to awaken something timeless within us. Whether it's the mathematical perfection of the Parthenon or the spiritual intensity of a Tibetan sand mandala, their power lies in their ability to bridge the mundane and the miraculous. Think about the last time an ancient artwork stopped you in your tracks. Maybe it was the lifelike gaze of a Roman bust or the intricate patterns of an Islamic manuscript. That moment of connection isn't accidental, it's by design. The artisans who shaped these works poured more than skill into them. They embedded layers of meaning meant to unfold across centuries. A Greek sculptor chiseling Apollo's curls wasn't just mimicking hair. He was encoding ideals of harmony and divinity. A Mayan scribe painting constellations in a codex wasn't merely recording stars. He was mapping the gods' celestial pathways. What's extraordinary is how these masterpieces refuse to fade into history. The pyramids still spark debates about engineering and cosmology. The Book of Kells inspires digital artists with its intricate knotwork. Even the Rosetta Stone, cracked and worn, continues to teach us about the resilience of human communication. They remind us that creativity at its highest level isn't about self-expression. It's about seeking truths that transcend individual lives. So here's the invitation. Let these works be more than relics. Let them be mirrors. When you next encounter an ancient masterpiece, whether in a museum, a book, or a documentary, pause and listen. What questions does it ask of you? What mysteries does it whisper? The dialogue that began millennia ago isn't over. It's simply waiting for your voice to join it. Hit like if this journey through time resonated with you. Share which ancient artwork moves you most in the comments, and subscribe to keep exploring the intersections of art, history, and the human spirit. The next revelation is just around the corner.